Welcome back to the Big Life Podcast. I'm Neal Oates Jr.
And I'm Robin Lewis, and we're really glad that you're with us here today.
Robin and audience, last week we talked about something that resonated deeply with a lot of you. The real reason you don't have time to think. So we slowed things down. We talked about margin, clarity, and why thinking time isn't a luxury for leaders, it's essential.
Yes, and today we want to build on that because once you create space to think, a new responsibility shows up. Clarity doesn't just bring peace, but clarity brings ownership, and we want to talk about that today.
So here's what today's conversation is going to be. It's going to be about the simple but challenging truth, and that is that intentional leadership starts with you.
And the emphasis there is on you. It's not with your team. It's not with your strategy. It's not with your calendar. Intentional leadership, it starts with the leader choosing to lead themselves on purpose.
Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined. They're built, brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
And so here's something that we've both seen over and over again, ladies and gentlemen, and that is that most leadership doesn't happen suddenly. It happens quietly.
It's so true. Leadership usually doesn't just collapse. We talked about this last week. It drifts. You don't all of a sudden wake up one day and say, I'm going to lead reactively, or I'm going to compromise my values. I'm going to lose clarity, right?
Absolutely. That's that dirty four-letter word, drift. But here's why it happens, ladies and gentlemen, and Robin. It happens because the business grows, the pressure increases, the calendar fills, all things that we think are good, and the margin disappears. And without realizing it, you start leading by default or drift.
So you're still effective, right? You're still responsible. You're still getting things done, but something feels off. And for a lot of leaders, that's the moment that they start asking more deeper questions, right? Like, why do I feel so stretched? Why am I always reacting? I feel like I'm always reacting. Why doesn't this the way that I thought that it would, right?
And so here's what we want to say to you. When you start asking those deeper questions, that's not failure, ladies and gentlemen. That's a signal that we must be aware of.
All right. So what do we mean by intentional leadership? Well, first of all, we're not talking about perfection. All right. So let's be easy with that. It's not about having it all figured out, but what we're talking about, most importantly here, is ownership. Intentional leadership is the decision to stop letting circumstances or urgency or other people's expectations to define how you lead.
Well, I want to say before we go any further, that's a hard thing to do, right? So we're not discounting the challenges there, but here's the key shift that we're going to ask of you. And that is that you cannot lead others intentionally if you're leading yourself accidentally. And we see that happen so often.
Right on. And that's why intentional leadership, therefore, it starts inward, right? So before you ask, what should my team be doing, or what should my business look like, or what needs to change out there, what we're suggesting is we have to start with asking, who am I becoming? What am I tolerating? There are things that we're tolerating in our lives. What am I tolerating? And what am I avoiding because it requires change?
I'm going to tell you what those are, ladies and gentlemen. For me, those are uncomfortable questions. But the reality is, those are what we would call leadership questions. And those are the questions that we must ask ourselves.
And so today, what we want to do is we want to offer 3 questions that you can sit with this month as we actually, wow, can you imagine it's the end of January already, 2026, as we record this? And we want you to sit with these 3 questions right where you find yourself, no matter when you're listening to this. And we don't want you to rush through them. And there's no perfect answer, but we want you to answer them honestly. Right, Neil? So you want to jump us off with the questions?
Oh, absolutely. So I get the honor of asking question number 1. And this one is where everything starts. And that question is, who am I becoming in this season? Now, how you define season could be different, but that's the question we want to ask. Who am I becoming in this season? Not who you were 5 years ago. That's not what we're asking. We're not asking who you think people expect you to be. Who are you becoming right now in this season of your life?
Exactly. Because leadership isn't just about what you build. It's about who you're becoming while you build it. It's so important. You can grow a business and shrink your soul. Doesn't that feel sad? I feel sad even just saying that. You can succeed outwardly, but you're drifting inwardly.
So, Robin, I want to just talk about something that I see intentional leaders do, if I can. And that is that intentional leaders pause long enough to ask, is this pace I'm living sustainable? Right? You might be succeeding, as you mentioned outwardly, but is this pace I'm living sustainable? Is the version of me this season is producing one that I respect? And I think those are those key questions, those honest questions that intentional leaders are asking on a consistent basis.
It's so good. When we think about who we're becoming, we're being intentional. So the first question is, who am I becoming this season? And
Mhm.
the second question that we want you to tackle is, what am I tolerating that's costing me clarity or energy? I'm going to say it again. What am I tolerating that's costing me clarity or energy?
Before you go any further, Robin, that word tolerating is a dangerous word, is it? Because we don't ever want to be a person who feels like we're tolerating something. But when you put that question out there, oh, that one hits you right there in the heart.
It's a big one. It is a big one. You know, a lot of leaders don't lack vision, they lack boundaries. You know, I don't lack vision. Oftentimes, I lack boundaries. And so I'm tolerating, you know, conversations that I should address. I'm tolerating, not addressing them, right?
Mm.
Roles that I should redesign. I'm tolerating them. Commitments that I've outgrown. I might be tolerating them.
Robin, here's what we know about tolerance. And so if we aren't careful, we think, well, tolerance is a good thing, right? The Bible says to tolerate. That's not what we're talking about here. But that word tolerance, it's sneaky because it doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like endurance. It feels like, oh, I just have to persist. But over time, tolerance drains that clarity that is so important for an intentional leader.
Exactly. That is the point. And so, as an intentional leader, it requires us to have the courage to say, this no longer fits. We have to have the courage to say, this needs to change, Robin. This needs to change. We need to have the courage. Intentional leadership is about having the courage to say, this is costing more than it's worth.
Okay. So we're asking the questions. One is who am I becoming in this season? What am I tolerating that's costing me? But then question number 3 is what deserves my focused leadership right now and what doesn't? So this means that we're going to have to cut some things off. What requires or what deserves my focused leadership right now and what doesn't? This is where clarity turns into action. And so we don't just get to say, I think I know the answer. We must do something with the decisions that we've made because not everything deserves your leadership at the same level.
And it's so true. I can think of there are some things that happened for me as I reviewed last year that I recognize that I need to focus on right here in terms of action, right? So the clarity needs to show up in what I'm doing, right? And there's some things, like that's what I mentioned in our last episode, prospecting, for example. I recognize that's something that I allow drift in my life, Neil. And that's something that I need to, that needs to show up in my life on a daily basis. That needs to show up on a daily basis. And so I have time blocked on my calendar for that. That just as an example. There are other things that I can share, but the point there is that my focus, my leadership needs to show up right now in what I am doing. Some things need your vision. Some things need your attention. And some things need to be released or delegated or redesigned, right? Intentional leaders decide where their best energy goes, not just their time, but where their best energy needs to go.
I love that you mentioned the distinction between vision, attention, and then maybe releasing, delegating, or just redesigned altogether. But here's what we know. When you get this part right, what Robin just said, leadership, as heavy as leadership can be, it starts to feel lighter. And that's attractive to us as high level leaders because even when responsibility is heavy, the fact that it feels lighter can be reassuring to us and it will encourage us to continue moving forward in intentional leadership.
Yeah, Neil. And if you would allow me, I'd like to speak to the leaders that are listening today who care deeply about their faith.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not you, it's okay. You can tune me out for just a minute here. But intentional leadership isn't about control. This is what I want you to hear. It's about stewardship. God rarely rushes leaders. What he often does is he invites us to slow down enough to listen. That's what I want our people to hear. And so it's not about rushing. It's about slowing down enough to listen.
And so we know that we talk about God gave us a calling, but what in my experience, what I've learned is that clarity often precedes the calling because then we actually gain clarity. Now we are receptive to slow down and hear that calling that might be on our lives, Robin.
Exactly. And then obedience usually follows honesty. When we're honest about what we're doing or not doing. You can't lead on purpose if you're avoiding truth. And truth doesn't just show up in a hurry. That's the point.
So that's reassuring to hear because as a leader, I rarely want to slow down. But as an intentional leader, here's what I must say. I want my leadership to honor God, number one. I want my leadership to serve people. And I want my leadership to build something that lasts. And that's a big key in me making intentional decisions to slow down and actually move forward in my leadership.
Yes, that's so good. And then what needs to happen in order for you to do that, right? And so that's where we are being intentional. That's such a good point and a way of putting it, Neil. Thank you for sharing. And so here's our invitation to you as we already have a month behind us in 2026. That's when we're recording this. You might be listening to this some other time. But our invitation to you, whenever you're listening to this, is don't overhaul your life. What we want to encourage you to do is to choose one intention for your leadership this season. That might be one word, or it might be one focus, or it might be one posture. The other day I did a talk and I talked about the leadership posture. And the leadership posture is something that trying to apply to my life. And that's where it's about adding value. Leadership is not about getting, it's about adding value. So that's a leadership posture example. But choose one intention for your leadership this season.
What's one weekly rhythm that's going to protect that one intention that reinforces it? And then finally, identify one thing you need to say no to because it competes with it. And that might be the hardest part of this. Robin, I have my one intention. I'm going to build out my weekly rhythm to reinforce that one intention. And then we have to identify what do we need to say no to because it competes with that intention, that yes, that we must get on our calendar.
And that's not weakness, folks. That's intentional leadership. That's what we're talking about here. And again, it's a simple truth, not anything new. I'm sure you've heard it already, but we're encouraging you now to make sure that you're applying this to your life. If I can be honest and transparent with you, I've shared it with Neal before. I've shared it on this show before, where when I look back sometimes and recognize that I didn't achieve what it is that I thought I should have achieved in my life, it's because I allowed drift. I wasn't as intentional with my leadership as I needed to be. And so that might be you. That's not weakness. What we're saying here is that we need to be intentional in our leadership, and that's what we're encouraging you to do.
Robin, I want to encourage you, sir, with this bit of truth is that leadership is always going to drift if we let it. So it's not just you. We have to be focused. We have to make some decisions, some intentional decisions to avoid that drift. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good or great of a leader you are. If we aren't careful, if we don't have intentional thought, action around it, by default, we'll end up drifting as leaders.
Exactly. And by the same token, it will also realign the moment that you choose to lead yourself on purpose. And so, though you can't go back and start all over again, you can start today and make a new end.
Here's why I'm excited about this conversation that we had today, Robin. It reminds me that I don't need to hustle more this year. And that's a big thing for me, and not having to put more into grind it out, hustle. So that's exciting. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're not asking you to hustle more in 2026.
And hear us, folks. What we are saying, though, is that we all need more ownership. We need to take ownership. Intentional leadership starts with you.
I was hoping that you would have a different answer by the time we got to the end of this episode, because I know you said early on that it doesn't start with my team, it doesn't start with my strategy, that it starts with me. And it sounds like that's where it ends as well. So I want to tell our audience, thank you. Once again, you have hung out here with Robin and myself here on The Big Life, and we don't take that for granted.
Yes, and as we wrap this up, please subscribe so that you receive the next episode automatically. Please give us a review if you haven't done so already, and please share this with somebody else who can use this thought of intentional leadership. And as we close it out, as we always do, remember, we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you. Peace.
Peace.